Let's talk about Estate, Raise the Realm, an upcoming worker placement engine building game. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we're going to talk about a game that's hitting Kickstarter soon. So I will put information about the campaign in the show notes below. This is a prototype that was sent to me by the folks over at Grod Games. So I know some things about the board, some things about the rules, maybe in the playmats have changed since I received this prototype. But it is a game, like I said, from Grod Games that combines two of my favorite mechanisms, which is worker placement and engine building. This is a game called Estate, Raise the Realm by Grod Games. It's a game for between 2 and 4 players. Kids aged 10 and up can figure this one out, and games take only an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to play. Let's take a deeper look at Estate, Raise the Realm by Grod Games. Estate is light to medium in terms of its complexity. I apologize here that the board isn't perfectly flat. Again, this is a prototype and I could not quite get it to flatten out. None of our playthroughs was it flat. You've got a little castle at the top. Underneath that is a big deck of cards. Those are the cards that are going to go into your estate. What are you doing in this game? What you're trying to do is earn the most victory points at the end of 5 eras or rounds. So there are these era cards that are going to be shuffled up at the beginning. They go face down underneath the bottom of the board. These have some event, some rules change that's going to affect that entire round. Oh, you can put citizens into your estate using 1 less grain, for example, or maybe they cost 1 more grain if there's a famine. So there are some positive and negative events. There's several of these events in the box, and what you do before you start the game is you separate out the good events and the bad ones, shuffle them all up, take 3 good events at random and 2 bad events at random, shuffle those up, and then those get dealt out to the bottom of the board to dictate what the rules are going to be through each round of the game. Each player is going to start by choosing their player color and their role. So there are asymmetric player abilities here. You've got, the last game we played, it was the Warlord versus the Trade Queen. So here's the Trade Queen with her 4 workers. There's a story on the back of those double-sided boards about the character that you're playing. Each of these leaders has a special ability. They get to start with a couple of cards in their estate, and they've got a different progression of numbers on their player mat as well, which is going to dictate how long it takes them to be able to draw an extra card, for example, when they're drawing cards from the estate deck. So you start with a couple of things already in your estate. You're going to start with a hand of a few of these estate cards. You also have a secret objective that nobody else knows about, a way to earn victory points. The last time we played, oh my gosh, I was really lucky. I had a player mat where I had an assassin as one of my starting cards. That the assassin allowed me to tuck citizens underneath it. So basically he's assassinating citizens in other people's estates, maybe you could say. But I could take cards from my hand and tuck them underneath. My secret goal, my victory point bonus at the end of the game was that I get a bonus for tucked cards. So I started with the assassin, which was just serendipity. It was pure fluke that I managed to get that same, to get a secret mission that coalesced so well with my starting cards. And then I was able to get a prison, and there was some other cards that allowed me to tuck other cards underneath. So I wound up with a whole bunch of victory points at the end of the game because of that secret goal. The cards have little wax seals at the bottom. So when I put this card into my estate, it's going to cost me 3 stone and 1 wood to play this card into my estate, this larder. And that is going to allow me to move a cube on this little noble track right here in the middle. And this is a track that will eventually allow me to draw more cards if I take a draw card action. So as my cube on the board moves up and up and up, oh, maybe I get to draw 4 cards instead of just 1. So the top track has a money bag. That's your production. And then you've got this noble one that allows you to draw cards. Then down here, there's a sickle. These will allow you to take advantage of some special actions in the middle of the board. So these are progress actions, they're called. They're more powerful actions. And as your cube moves across this track, Eventually, you might be able to place a worker all the way up on progress number 4, and that's probably going to be quite a powerful action at the end of the game. These are assigned randomly too, so there's a small deck of a couple of progress 1, a couple of progress 2, progress 3, progress 4, and you shuffle those up and deal them out at the start of the game as well. And of course, it is a worker placement game. So you start with 4 workers. If I'm able to somehow amass 4 grain, I could place a worker on a spot that would allow me to get an extra worker in the next era. That might be helpful for me if I'm able to get that early on. But you've got some action spaces on your player board. These action spaces are closed, meaning that I can't put 2 workers on them. So once a worker goes there, that's my action there for the turn. There are some cards, though, that will allow you to move a worker that's already been placed. That could get you an open space for a later action. So you might be drawing cards, you might be producing on cards that are already in your estate. You might take an action here on the board, or you might play a card from your hand if you have the resources. So you're producing to get those resources. Sometimes your production could allow you to, dungeon a card or tuck a card underneath another one. You're trying to work towards those victory points at the end. Each era has a special goal that will allow you to earn some victory points too. For example, in the era of peace, you're going to get some victory points if you're the player who's played the most cards that have 3 or more victory points on them. So you're going to earn victory points at the end by accomplishing those era goals, by accomplishing your secret mission. Each card that you play into your estate has a victory point value at the bottom. Sometimes they have some ability that will increase victory points either when it's played or at the end of the game. Earn a victory point for each farm and other players' estates, for example. So there's lots of different ways that the cards interact. Once all the players have finished their actions for the turn, so each player is placing 1 worker and doing some action, and it's going around the circle, and usually once all the workers are done or once all the players pass, then it's the end of the era. You're going to figure out who won that era's objective. You'll get some victory points or some cards or resources for that, and then the board resets. You take all your workers back, you move on to era number 2, you flip that era number 2 card over, figure out what that goal is going to be, what that special rule is going to be. The marketplace here on the side of the board gets replenished, and everything starts again. One thing that does happen, though, at the start of each new round is that these little spaces on the board accumulate resources at the beginning of each new era. So if nobody's taken, say, the grain from this pile, in the second era, it's going to have 2 grain. In the third, it's going to have 3. So that's a place by the time maybe you get to the third or fourth era, people are going to want to be going first so that they can place a worker on there and get lots of resources for cheap. The game ends once you've finished era number 5. There is a negative event, though, a cataclysm that instantly ends the game. So hopefully, like, we house ruled it so that if it was on the first or second era that we were going to discard it and draw a new one. But there is a cataclysm that could end the game early and make things go quite a bit faster, surprise everyone who is trying to plan something out. But typically, you're going to go all the way to era number 5. Then you're going to count up the victory points at the end, points on the cards in your estate. You do not get victory points for leftover resources unless you had some card in your estate that you're storing them on. So for example, the King's Forest, I think it's called, or the Royal Forest, is a place where you can have 5 wood. Up to 5 wood can be stacked there, and you're going to get victory points for things that are stacked on cards. But if they're just left over on your player board, for example, to be spent later, and the game ends, well, you're out of luck. You don't get any points for those ones. Now, what skills are you practicing, though, when you play a game of Estate Raise the Realm? Well, this is a game that involves some planning. You've got the long-term goal of your secret objective that's going to earn you some victory points. You've got the shorter-term era objective, and then you've got the immediate-term goals of, well, what resources do I need to play this card? Do I want to get a card from the marketplace first? Maybe there's something special that I need that's going to work well with one of my other cards. So there is a lot of planning. You're budgeting your actions with your workers. You're budgeting your resources as well. And when you're doing that planning and budgeting, we are talking about executive functioning skills, the skills and behaviors that you need to work towards a goal. And this is a game that does require both short-term and longer term planning, and there's lots of resources from cards in your hand to wood and iron and grain and steel, wood and iron and grain and stone that you're keeping track of and budgeting in order to get those cards out. Final thoughts about Estate Raise the Realm. Well, of course, this is a prototype, so I say final thoughts, but things might change over time. I know my initial thoughts when I first played the game was that some of the language in the rule book and on the board itself was a bit confusing, but they've already changed those things. So my concerns are addressed before I even talk to you about the game itself. But as I said at the beginning of this video, what we're doing here is combining worker placement and engine building. Plus you've got asymmetric powers. These are things that I really like in a game. And one of the things that really makes Estate interesting for me and for the people who I play these kinds of games with is that it's super easy to create an engine that does something. So many engine builders, you need a particular card, and maybe that card doesn't come up. You've got to, your engine can't do everything that you want it to do until you get some certain card, and then you need the resources to play that card, so it has to come up at the right time. That's not the case, at least in the playthroughs that we had of Estate. Now, there's a big stack of cards here, but there are a lot of duplicates. So if I needed a royal consort, those are going to come up multiple times probably in a game. So you'll see those a few times as you're playing. And maybe you don't need that specific card. Maybe really what you're looking for is a card that has that crown on it so that you can move your cube on your player mat up one, and then you can draw more cards next time, and it's easier to find the card that you want. It is really easy to get some kind of an engine going, whether it's I can do something with stone. Oh, I need a quarry to do something with stone. Okay, well, there's a quarry. I can put that quarry into my engine, and now I'm going to be able to do something that's really cool once I start producing. That is a thing that doesn't work in every single game, especially when you've got a great big deck of cards like this, but there's enough overlap in the strategies. The cards interact with one another in enough ways, whether you're talking about citizens versus construction. So citizens or buildings, maybe you're thinking about production citizens, and that means they have to have a little citizen logo, plus they have to have a money bag on the side. So there are lots of ways that the cards interact. It's super easy to get combos. And that's something that all the players I played this game with really liked. Now, I say it's easy to find the cards that you want because there are multiple copies of the cards in the deck. Maybe that's a downside too. If we want to talk about downsides of the game, there is a lot of repetition. Who knows, maybe once this whole thing is finished, there'll be unique artwork for each of the royal consorts. I don't know what their plans are. I don't know all the ins and outs of what's happening at Grod Games. But that wasn't really a downside for me. We didn't mind having the repetition because we wanted copies of those cards in each of our estates. You know, if there's only one royal consort and that's the card you need and somebody else gets it, well, then you're going to be out of luck. So there is some repetition, but that's really what made the combos possible. You've got this estate at the top, and as I said, the pieces might change at the end, but this is a little castle that goes at the top of the board. You're meant to put your extra workers on top of it and put the deck underneath. The deck is too tall to fit underneath the estate building that I was given. It doesn't really serve a purpose other than a place to put your cards and to put your workers on top of. We wound up, honestly, in the last few playthroughs, we didn't even build it. We just kept it off to the side. My concern with these things is always when you're putting it together and taking it apart, what's the wear and tear going to be like on those kinds of pieces? I've left some other cardboard constructions from other games together on my shelf as kind of decorations, but really it's so that they don't get wrecked and I can keep playing the game. So this one, not quite tall enough for all of the cards in the deck, and it doesn't really serve a gameplay purpose other than it looks neat at the top of the board. I did have, as I said, when this game first came in and we played our first round of it, some concerns about the clarity in the language between the rule book and what's on the board and what's on the player mats. Those have been addressed. I think all of those have been addressed already. So everything is much more clear now, according to the emails that I'm getting. They've redesigned some things on the board and on the mats. So that's great. So for example, they talked about era actions on the board. They do have eras at the bottom of this board, but any era action referred to any action you're taking on this board. Yeah, that didn't really, they changed it to board actions, so that made a lot more sense. So anyway, they've improved all of that stuff. The rules are becoming more clear. It's not a game that reinvents the wheel. It's not doing anything brand new that you've never seen before, but I really like what it does and how it does it. We were able to get some good combos going. Everything was clear, easy to understand. The cards work together so well. The artwork is good. Uh, I like the individual player abilities, the asymmetric abilities, the fact that you're starting your engine with some cards already in it that work with the ability of your that's on your player board. I mean, maybe that's a bit of an innovation. I really like that you're already beginning with a toe in the water, so to speak. You've already got the first step taken towards your goal of winning the game. So what fun we had playing Estate. Thanks so much to Grod Games for sending Estate Raise the Realm my way. Like I said, I'll put information about the campaign in the show notes, but if you have any questions or comments or concerns, you can, of course, leave them in the comment section of this video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.